And I'm so thrilled to be back for our next Take the Mic segment, all about the written word. So we're going to hear from a few students as we go along, but first I want to welcome up the co-founder of Green Jobs Board, the founder of BrownGirlGreen, the one, the only, Kristy Drutman. Come on, Kristy.
Where the school is.
The stage is yours.
Like, what's the natural environment? Like, nice.
My journey.
So,
I am Kristy Drutman. I am the founder and creator of my media platform, BrownGirlGreen, where I share stories online about climate solutions, specifically highlighting the voices of folks underrepresented in climate solution storytelling. My journey started like many of yours in this room. I was a college student at UC Berkeley, and I was doing, advocacy on the environment across the country with other youth advocates, and felt like I would talk to policymakers and climate scientists, and I was like, what do you guys think is the gap to reach more people? And they were like, we just don't know how to tell the right stories. And I realized that I didn't want to wait on an institution or my university, and so my last semester at UC Berkeley, I actually did a podcast assignment as my first podcast I ever produced called BrownGirlGreen. And I was so excited to see the folks on stage here who also produced their first podcast, because it brought me back to a time where I only had $100 in my pocket to buy my first podcast mic, and just went on LinkedIn and stalked people. And I was like, hey, you're really cool and you're doing great work in the environment. Can I interview you? And what happened years later was I amassed a huge following online of people who wanted to hear more about solutions and stories to solve the climate crisis. And it really gave me a lot of inspiration and hope that the solutions exist. We just need more avenues and pathways to tell those stories. And from the success that I built with BrownGirlGreen, I was wondering what other stories are missing from the climate space. And I realized that there wasn't a lot of stories being told about the future of green workforce. Again, I would go to all these climate conferences, and again, I went to UC Berkeley, studied environmental policy and urban planning, and was learning all these incredible lessons, but I was like, how the heck am I gonna get a job when I graduate from this place? And basically, it was so challenging to build my own career that I decided to become an entrepreneur for that exact reason. I built my media platform, that gained a lot of success. I was invited as an assistant lecturer at UC Berkeley, at my alma mater, at the age of 23, to come back and teach, because I built my own thing as a storyteller. And then, after the success of BrownGirlGreen, I went back and was like, I need to tell stories about green workforce. So I started my series called Green Jobs Board that turned into a company that now reaches 200,000 green job seekers on the internet, connecting them with job opportunities across the green economy. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because it's so difficult to learn how you can channel your skills and your passions and your strengths into a career that matters and can make meaningful impact. And Green Jobs Board does that. We host events, we post content, and we connect you directly to opportunities through our platform that we're building. So, we're thinking about storytelling in a meaningful, action-oriented way that is taking things from not just the storytelling online, but actually changing things in real life. We just hosted our Green Jobs Pavilion event that we hosted in Los Angeles just last weekend. We had over 250 young people, early to mid-career professionals that follow me on the internet, who came and learned about climate careers and actually were provided career coaches and tools and support for their journey. And so for me, I view myself as not just someone who is a storyteller. I view myself as a cultural organizer, using digital media tools as scaffolding and infrastructure to support communities who have been previously left out of the climate conversation to feel seen, to feel heard, and have actual tools to move forward. So I hope that my story today inspires you, that if you have a story to tell and you want to go independent, you want to be an independent media producer, you have so many tools at your disposal, even more than I had several years ago when I was graduating college. And if that's of interest to you, I hope you come up to me later today. I'm always happy to answer questions on what it takes to, go out there and try to build your own thing. But I'm just so inspired by all the students in this room today who are telling stories and being brave enough and vulnerable enough to make your voices heard, because it's going to inspire so many people that you don't even know are going to be impacted by it. So thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to join the next session.
Before you sit, I feel like we need like a selfie moment. There we go. Kristy's the best. She mentioned the Brown Girl Green podcast. Kristy, look at this. Yeah. All these beautiful faces.
And that has also been on the Brown Girl Green show.
That's what I was about to say. I've been on the Brown Girl Green show. So before you take a seat, let's welcome up our other expert panelists. First, Ben Clark, filmmaker Ben Clark, as well as Sadie Babits from NPR. Come on out, Ben, Sadie, get comfortable. It's great to see you. Long time no see. How's the family? All of it? Get comfortable. And now, without further ado, of course, I want to welcome up our first storyteller in this written word section of the Take the Mic show. From American University, please welcome Clair Sapilewski. Clair, come on out.
Hi.
Great to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right, so we're dying to know about your story. Tell us more about your story.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is the story of a kelp forest, and it began when I realized that within my lifetime, there has been over a 90% decrease in the kelp forest canopy off the coast of Northern California. And that statistic really woke me up, and it made me want to bring people into the world of this ecosystem, which is actually the second most biodiverse marine ecosystem on the planet. So I've always thought that it's easier to care about something if you understand it, and it's easier to want to protect something if you care about it. So I wanted to make people understand a kelp forest. So I brought a few underwater cameras with me and some kelp forest experts, and that's what I did.
That is intense and amazing. And let's take a look at a little excerpt from your story. Step on back.
As I descended below the kelp's canopy and into what felt like a different world, I was greeted by bat stars, anemones, kelp crabs, an array of fish species, and colorful tiny sea slugs called nudibranchs. Point Lobos State Park in Carmel, California, is home to a few of the kelp forests that continue to thrive in Northern California. Here, I watched otters tangle themselves in kelp to prevent from floating away. Great white egrets perch on the floating kelp canopy, and humpback whales feed not far from shore.
I have to say, I love watching the panelists as that's going. Ben, you just look transfixed.
It's cool. It's a cool story. I mean, I thought one of the most amazing parts about what really drove me into your story was you talked about a photograph from Lover's Point. Am I right? And that maybe your parents were scuba diving. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, what an amazing place to bring me into this. Like to think of two people in love that now have a daughter who's trying to save these places.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, like, how. Is that what drove you to feel like it was so necessary to tell this story, other than obviously the lack of things? Like, how is it that you see humans driving this change in both directions?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think my overwhelming awareness of a kelp forest actually made me take longer to find this story because it was just such a part of the landscape of California growing up. Yeah. I just knew about kelp forests, and my parents dove there, and it was just there. So I didn't really wake up and consciously examine this environment until I learned about the rapid decline that it's experiencing. Uh-huh. And then I was like, now it's time to tell people about the kelp forest, because I talked to friends in DC and this area, and they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what was off the coast of California. Yeah. And I think in order to save it, we need people to understand it. So that was what sort of led me to write the story.
Glad you did. You got great parents.
I know I was going to go over to Kristy knowing that California is home for you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I loved the narrative that you wove into the piece. I feel like people can list species and say like, oh, this species is endangered and all of these things, but I think you actually talked about like your personal connection to it. And I think when it comes to effective environmental storytelling, you have to explain to people like, this is your home. And I think as someone who is from California, I think I have taken kelp forest for granted, and I think I'm realizing I want to do a diving trip sometime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should.
Sadie?
That was such a compelling narrative that just sucked me in with your writing, and the visuals were really incredible. And I loved feeling like I wanted to learn even more about kelp forests. And one of the things I really appreciated in your story is that you kept that narrative all the way through, a very personal connection, but you brought in the science and the research. And I loved it. You had these great subheads in the digital story, like enemy number one, like sea urchins. They're a big problem. They're a big problem in Northern California. They're also a big problem off the coast of Washington State too. And so there's some really interesting research there. So I really applaud the care that you brought to the story, because it gives us a little bit of hope too.
Yeah. It's interesting because writing about science, bringing the research is more like first nature to me as a journalist. So it was exciting to kind of bring in the more personal side of it with this story. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire.
Of course.
Can
Thank
give
you.
it up for Claire. All right. And next up, our next storyteller in the written category, welcoming up from Florida State University, FSU, Cameron Glymph. Come on out, Cameron. All right, Cameron, you know the deal. Tell us about your story.
Yeah, for sure. So lots of mental health treatment happens in clinical environments, but what if we could find the same mental health treatment within the outdoor world that we're all familiar with? For this story, I was really interested in finding out how the environment can impact our mental health, and I found the wonderful practice of forest therapy. And forest therapy started in Japan as a practice of shirin-yoku, or forest bathing, and it's really about being mindful about the environment around you and really taking in nature and appreciating it in a way that you don't really get to on a day-to-day basis. And what I found through my reporting is that it's not just good for mental health. You know, it helps with stress reduction, and it helps with just improved sleep, and has a whole lot of other benefits. But it also helps the land itself and the environment sort of with conservation, because when you form a relationship with the land in the way that forest bathing or forest therapy forces you to, you're more inclined to protect it. And so forest therapy is really just a practice in reciprocity and mutual respect for the environment, and it helps with conservation. So that's what my story was about.
Thank you, Cameron. Let's take a look at an excerpt from your story.
Forest therapy interrupts the loop of constant prediction, evaluation, and problem solving that dominates our daily thoughts and produces cognitive overload. When you take a step back in this way and really begin to immerse yourself in nature, there's an opportunity to form a relationship with the land. And like any relationship, you have to work to make sure it's healthy and maintained. For that reason, forest therapy can be a direct motivation for environmental preservation.
Sadie, you already know I'm coming to you. I saw you light up with that. What came up for you?
So my first reaction is just absolute calm. I love this story. We do not do enough storytelling about mental health and what is going on with our ecosystems, and the fact that you were able to connect it to environmental preservation and taking care of these systems is really beautiful. I was also thinking about my city of Portland, Oregon, which has this beautiful, it's called Forest Park, and it just, the compelling nature of being out in the woods. So it's a story that we can really connect to, which I think is an element of really good storytelling.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kristy?
An element that I thought was really compelling about your story is that you don't just talk about the nature connection, you also connect it to social justice. You talk about that forest bathing and nature-based therapies aren't just beneficial, but it also forces us to reckon our relationship with the land, and also stories about land displacement. I would love if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Florida in general has a really big indigenous history. The Seminole Tribe in Florida had a really big presence throughout the displacement period within Native American history. And so when I was interviewing people in Florida about this story, it kept on coming up, and it felt like it's something that needed to be really spotlighted. A lot of forest therapy practices embed land acknowledgements into their practice, but a lot of the indigenous people that I spoke to actually said that there was more that needed to be done, and so I felt that it was really important to just give a voice to that and say that there is more work to be done within this discipline.
I found your connection to mental health really amazing. Richard Louv is someone who I think of who had talked about nature deficit disorder, which is an important topic to kind of fund. And then on my own personal end, like I'm someone who went from exploring nature to absolutely protecting it. I'm like not only forest bathed, I feel like I've been drowned by the forest into protecting it. Are there other things you left out of this story that were really exciting to you that you felt like you could have included? Because I feel like you did a comprehensive job, but I feel like you're inspired.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was kind of like, one thing that I've written about in the past is for climate anxiety, climate change anxiety. And I feel like it would be a separate rabbit hole to go down into how forest therapy could potentially help with that and like find connections in that. But that's a maybe different story. Maybe it's a story for Planet Forward later on. But
I love it.
Yeah, another thing that I was interested in that I decided to exclude.
That's cool. I think you should do it.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, anything else about your story that you just want to mention before we wrap up?
I hope that you all enjoy nature and take some time out to go enjoy the wonderful world that we have around us.
There we go. Thank you so much, Cameron. And our third and final storyteller in the written word category, let's welcome up Russel Conti from Montana State University.
Yeah.
Howdy.
Howdy. Go. Wow. In DC, I haven't heard a howdy in a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
There we go. Welcome, Montana. Tell us about your story.
Yeah, so my story kind of started with me doing my job, and I asked myself, what the heck am I doing? Who else felt that way at their work a little bit, right? But for me, it was weird because I had the job that I wanted to do. I was working with water. I was being a scientist, and I was making impact in my community studying the water. But the way that I'd been trained how to do my work scientifically had me, relating to the water in this way that was objective. And that way of relating to the water and doing the scientific research was contrary to the indigenous belief systems and values that I grew up with and learned. So my story, Learning from Water, kind of talks about that journey, trying to navigate how do I maintain these indigenous values while also doing a really good job being a scientist.
Amazing. Let's take a look at the excerpt from your story.
At the center of all life is water. For humans, animals, and plants, water is essential. Without it, there is no life. The water we drink shapes our health, and today, many of our communities ask, how can we keep our water clean? While engineering our way to clean water is one method, I believe another simple and most sustainable method for our communities to maintain clean water is to remember the natural processes that have kept water clean for thousands of years. We must understand our role in the web of relationships that influence our water, acknowledging the interconnectedness of all things, and learn the Lakota term, Atake Oyasa.
Kristy, I saw you nodding the entire time. What came up for you?
I just found your piece really beautiful and compelling because you embedded so much knowledge from your elders and people in your community. And I think that type of community wisdom doesn't get acknowledged compared to Western science, but it's when we understand that a lot of the destruction of a lot of the waterways that are happening in the US is due to needing to colonize and develop, and then that leads to impacts like algal blooms and stagnant waters and pollution. I think having a free-flowing river is so critical, and it's political, it's environmental, it's Yeah, everything that you brought into your article is so brilliant because I think it challenges this notion that we need to just rely on conventional Western science to determine the health of, a waterway, when in fact, if we look into history, like indigenous water protectors have been doing this for centuries and they didn't have the issues we have today with our water system. So with all this modern technology, what are we actually solving, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I loved how you brought that in and challenged people's maybe misconceptions around that.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about conventional methods of ways of cleaning water, right? There's a conventional way to tell the story that you did in a very traditional format. You talk to your experts, and that would be fine. But I was riveted by this story because you flipped the narrative and you gave yourself permission to be a part of the story. And I think you actually made it so much more interesting and helped us see the interconnectedness of nature, which is so difficult to do in stories. And I thought you really drew that out well. So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about how you arrived at deciding to take that perspective.
Oh, that's a great question. It was a really hard journey for me to kind of come up with the story I wanted to tell. I knew I wanted to tell the river story, but there was a hurdle I had to go over, and that was figuring out what stories are mine to tell. And a lot of that comes back to this idea of relationality. That was a huge common thread in my story, was relationality to the river, to my community, and coming to my community and trying to figure out and ask my elders, here's the story I want to tell. How can I tell it? What are some lessons I can learn? What knowledge can I share? What's acceptable to share? And along that journey, I learned that the story I wanted to share, I couldn't share because that was the river story and that wasn't my story to share. The river story is so much bigger than anything I could comprehend because it expands deep into geological time, space, and everything. So I arrived at the story I can tell is the relationship that I've built with the river and the lessons that I've learned from it. So that's kind of how I arrived at it. And another kind of goal in telling that story is I want to try to tell the story in a way that my ancestors would understand. So as a scientist too, it can be hard sometimes conveying your research in a way that can reach a broad audience. So this is my opportunity to take my scientific work, deliver it to my community, to make it accessible to all, and try to do honor to the river, try to do honor to my culture, and so that's how I arrived at the story.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you.
Good work, Russell. Just one more round of applause for Russell.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. See you backstage. There we go. Awesome. And by the way, can I just ask our panelists to stand up?
Great.
That was the last of our written word segment, of course. Thank you so much to our panelists. If we could give them a round of applause.